The heavy, iron-bound door of the diner slammed open, cracking against the plaster wall. It wasn't the wind, it was him. Alpha Kalen, his face a mask of cold thunder, stalked into the greasy spoon, his two massive enforcers, Jax and Riker, flanking him like shadows bred from nightmares. The smell of ozone and wet fur rolled off him, choking the aroma of stale coffee and fried eggs. His eyes, the color of a frozen lake, scanned the pathetic little room and landed on my little brother, Finn, who was cowering behind the counter, a dirty dish towel clutched in his hand. Kalen didn't speak. He simply moved, his hand lashing out, grabbing Finn by the throat and lifting him clean off the floor. Finn's feet kicked, a terrible, strangled sound rattling in his chest. My heart didn't just stop, it shattered. Before thought, before reason, I grabbed the heavy cast iron skillet from the stovetop, still sizzling with bacon grease, and swung it with all my strength, not at his head, but at the thick oak table he was passing. The iron connected with the wood, and the table split with a sound like a gunshot. The entire diner froze. Kalen's head snapped toward me, his grip on Finn tightening. I raised the skillet, my arms trembling so badly I could barely hold it. "Put him down," I whispered, the sound raw. He just stared. I screamed it. I said, "Put him down." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of disbelief warring with the sheer, murderous rage. "You dare," he breathed. I took a step forward, the hot grease spattering my arm. "Touch him again," I vowed, my voice breaking but my eyes locked on his, "and I swear on my mother's grave you'll pull back a stump." Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. The two other patrons in the diner, Old Man Hemlock and a trucker named Sal, looked like they'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Jax and Riker tensed, their hands dropping to the knives at their belts, but Kalen didn't move. His gaze was fixed on me, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever experienced. It wasn't just anger, it was assessment. He was looking at me like a puzzle he'd just found, one he intended to solve by tearing it to pieces. Slowly, almost thoughtfully, he lowered Finn. My brother collapsed to the floor, gasping and clutching his bruised throat. I wanted to run to him, to shield him with my body, but I didn't dare move. I kept the skillet raised. Kalen took a step toward me. I took a step back. "What is your name?" His voice was a low growl that vibrated in my bones. "Ilara," I choked out. "Ilara." He savored the word, testing its weight. He took another step, close enough now that I could see the flecks of silver in his ice-blue eyes. He was impossibly large, a mountain of muscle and suppressed violence. And he was the alpha of Stonefang, the man who had united the three warring packs of the valley through sheer, brutal force. He was the man who'd allegedly torn out the throat of the previous alpha with his bare hands. He sniffed the air, a deep inhalation. His brow furrowed. "You have no scent." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of confusion. I had no idea what he meant. Every shifter had a scent. Omegas like me smelled of rain and herbs, betas of earth and pine. Alphas like him of ozone and storms. I'd always been told mine was just weak, barely there. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice shaking. "Liar." He was so close now. He reached out, not to hurt me, but to brush a strand of lank brown hair from my face. His fingers were calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle, which was somehow more terrifying than the violence. I flinched hard. His lips pulled back in a semblance of a smile, but it held no warmth. An omega. A scrawny, mouthy, scentless omega. He looked from me to Finn, who was now weeping silently against the counter. He dropped a tray. At my feet. Outside. "As a boy," I pleaded. "He's clumsy. I'll pay for the damages. I'll clean it up." "I don't want your money," Kalen said, his eyes darkening. "And I don't want your apologies." He tilted his head. "You stood up to me." "No one stands up to me. Not my enforcers, not the pack elders, not rival alphas." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was meant only for me, and certainly not a broken little thing serving slop in a roadside dive. He reached out and, with one finger, pushed the heavy iron skillet down until my arms dropped, my strength completely gone. He held my gaze. "This is my territory. You exist here because I allow it. Your brother breathes because I have not decided to stop him." "What do you want?" I whispered, tears of terror and rage stinging my eyes. "You," he said simply. "You have courage. Or you're a fool. I haven't decided which." He turned from me, his massive shoulders blocking out the light from the door. "Be at my pack house by moonrise. Alone." My blood ran cold. "No, I won't. You can't just—" He turned back, his patience gone. The air crackled around him. "I can, and I will. If you are not at my gates by the time the moon is high, I will return. And when I do," he gestured to the diner, "I will burn this place to the ground. And then," his gaze fell on Finn, "I will take your brother, and you will never see him again." He didn't wait for an answer. He and his enforcers swept out of the diner, leaving a void of cold air and terror in their wake. The moment the door shut, I dropped the skillet. It clanged loudly on the linoleum floor. I rushed to Finn, pulling him into my arms. He was shaking violently. "Elara, Elara, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He sobbed into my apron. "Shh, it's okay. You're okay. I've got you," I murmured, rocking him, my own heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. Old Man Hemlock shuffled over, his face pale. "You gotta go, girl. You gotta do what he says." "He can't just summon me," I cried, clutching Finn tighter. "He's Alpha Kalen," Sal the trucker said, throwing a few crumpled bills on the counter. He didn't meet my eyes. He grabbed his cap and hurried out, the little bell on the door tinkling mockingly. Hemlock sighed, his shoulders slumped. "He's not wrong. Since his father died and he took over, he's different, colder. He's been securing the territory. The Shadow Ridge Pack has been testing the borders, and Kalen meets every threat with absolute brutality. He doesn't tolerate weakness, Elara, not for a second." "And what I did? That was weakness?" I asked, bewildered. "No, child," Hemlock said, his old watery eyes meeting mine. "That's the problem. What you did, that was strength. And Kalen doesn't tolerate a strength that isn't his own." He patted my shoulder. "You go. Finn will be safe with me and my missus tonight. We'll look after the boy. You survive the night." I looked down at Finn, at his tear-streaked face and the dark finger-shaped bruises already forming on his neck. This was my fault. My defiance had painted a target on both our backs. Kalen hadn't just been angry about a dropped tray. He had been looking for an excuse, a way to assert his dominance. and I, like a fool, had handed him the perfect one. I had no pack. Our parents had died years ago from the wolf blight, leaving us as orphans under the protection of our territory's alpha, Marcus. But Marcus was a weak-willed man who paid tribute to Kalen and stayed out of his way. He wouldn't lift a finger to help us. We were alone. I had no choice. I had to go. I kissed Finn's forehead, my tears dripping into his hair. "It's going to be okay, Finny. I promise. I'm going to fix this." He just cried harder. "Hell hurt you, Elara." I forced a smile. A brittle, terrifying thing. He can try. I spent the next few hours in a daze. I scrubbed the diner until my hands were raw, packed a small bag with my only spare set of clothes and my mother's silver locket, and walked Finn to the Hemlock's small cottage at the edge of the woods. Mrs. Hemlock hugged me tightly, pressing a hunk of bread and cheese into my hands. "Be smart, child, not just brave," she warned me. I nodded, unable to speak. I hugged Finn one last time, promising to come back for him, a promise that felt like a lie in my mouth. Then I turned and walked toward the mountain. The Stone Fang pack house wasn't a house. It was a fortress. It loomed on the side of the mountain, a sprawling structure of dark stone and thick timber, built to withstand a siege. It glowed with lights, but they offered no welcome. As I approached the massive, iron-reinforced gates, the moon was just cresting the ridge, bathing the valley in pale, ghostly light. Moonrise. 2 guards, armed with spears and long knives, stepped out of the shadows. "I'm here to see Alpha Kalen," I said, my voice barely a tremor. He's expecting me." The guards looked me up and down, their expressions a mixture of contempt and curiosity. "This is the one?" one of them muttered to the other. "Looks like a stiff breeze would snap her in two." "The Alpha said to bring her to the kitchens the moment she arrived," the other replied. They opened the gate just wide enough for me to slip through, and then slammed it shut behind me with a sound of finality, like a coffin lid closing. One of them grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "This way, Omega." He didn't lead me to the grand entrance, but around the side, through a muddy courtyard and down a set of stone steps into the cavernous, sweltering kitchens. The smell of roasting meat, boiling vegetables, and unwashed bodies hit me like a physical blow. Dozens of shifters, mostly Omegas, and those too old or weak to be on patrol, scurried back and forth, hauling massive pots and trays. The guard shoved me toward a large, broad-shouldered woman with a face like a sour apple. "This is the one the Alpha sent. Put her to work." The woman, the kitchen mistress, scowled at me. "Another mouth to feed, and this one looks half-starved already. What's your name?" "Elara." "Well, Elara, you're not special here. Grab a brush. The scullery floor doesn't scrub itself." She threw a bucket and a stiff bristled brush at my feet. "And if you're thinking the Alpha summons makes you important, think again. Sometimes he just likes a new toy to break." My heart sank, but I bit my lip, picked up the bucket, and headed to the scullery. It was a damp, windowless room piled high with dirty, grease-caked pots. The floor was slick with grime. I fell to my knees and began to scrub. I scrubbed for hours. My back ached, my knees were raw, and my hands were bleeding. The kitchen mistress, a woman named Greta, watched me with a hawk's eye, screaming at me if I slowed my pace. It was a deliberate, soul-crushing humiliation. I was no one. I was nothing. Finally, long after midnight, Greta kicked my bucket. "That's enough. Get to the barracks. Omega quarters are in the sub-level. Don't be late for pre-dawn prep." I hauled my aching body to my feet. A young girl, maybe a few years younger than me, showed me the way. The Omega quarters were a long, cold stone room filled with thin, lumpy straw mattresses on the floor. There were at least 30 other women and a few young men crammed into the space. I found an empty mattress in the corner, collapsed onto it, and, despite the snoring, the coughing, and the cold, I fell into an exhausted sleep. I was dreaming of Finn, of the diner, of the smell of coffee, when a hand clamped over my mouth. My eyes flew open. A dark shape was leaning over me. "Be quiet, or I'll silence you permanently." I knew that voice. It wasn't Kalen. It was Jax, one of his enforcers, the one with the cruel mouth and dead eyes. He hauled me to my feet, his hand still tight over my mouth, and dragged me from the barracks. I tried to kick, to bite, but he was too strong. He shoved me out into the moonlit courtyard and then up a set of private stairs into the Alpha's wing of the pack house. He threw me into a room. It was nothing like the barracks. A huge fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow over thick fur rugs, heavy oak furniture, and a massive 4-poster bed. Alpha Kalen stood by the window, staring out at the moonlit valley. He was bare-chested, wearing only a pair of black pants. His back was a road map of scars. "Leave us," he commanded. Jax nodded. "Alpha." He gave me one last, lingering look of malice before closing the door, leaving me alone with the beast. Kalen turned. His face was unreadable. "You came. You didn't give me a choice," I spat, rubbing my bruised arms. "There is always a choice," he said, walking toward me. "You could have run, taken your brother and fled into the Shadow Ridge lands. They might have even welcomed you, for a time. And be hunted by you for the rest of my life? Or worse, be captured by Alpha Xander. I've heard the stories. So, you chose the monster you know." He stopped, just out of arm's reach. "You smell of lye soap and pot scum. You're the one who sent me to the kitchens." "I sent you to be observed," he corrected me, his voice dangerously soft. "Greta reports to me. She said you worked. You didn't cry, you didn't complain, you just worked." He circled me like a wolf circles prey. "You are an anomaly, Alara, an Omega who defies an Alpha, a girl with no scent, a worker who doesn't break. It's irritating." "What do you want from me?" I demanded, exhaustion making me bold. "Why am I here? Are you going to kill me? Make me your servant?" He laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Kill you? I could have done that in the diner. A servant? I have hundreds." He stopped in front of me, his gaze intense. "I am going to find out what you are." He reached for me. I flinched, bracing for a blow. But again, his touch was unexpectedly gentle. He cupped my chin, tilting my face up to the light. His thumb brushed over my cheekbone. I was hit with a jolt, not of fear, but of something else. A current, a spark of energy that arced between his skin and mine. It was warm and strange and terrifying. He felt it too. His eyes widened, and he snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. He stared at his own palm, then back at me, his expression turning from a predator's curiosity to a storm of confusion and rage. "What was that?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. I don't know," I whispered, my heart hammering. He lunged, grabbing me by the shoulders. He wasn't gentle this time. He shook me, his fingers digging in like talons. "What are you? Are you a witch sent by Xander to curse me?" "No, I'm nothing. I'm just Ilara. I run a diner. I take care of my brother. That's it." "Lies," he roared, his alpha power flooding the room, pressing down on me, forcing me to my knees. It was a physical weight, an invisible force demanding submission. I gasped, my lungs struggling for air. I was supposed to bow my head, to expose my throat, to show him I was no threat. But I couldn't. Some stubborn, stupid core of defiance inside me refused. I fought against the pressure, my muscles screaming. I locked my eyes with his. I would not look away. I would not submit. Kalen's face contorted. He was pushing his power at me, enough to make a beta warrior collapse, and I was resisting. I was just an omega, but I was resisting him. "Submit!" he roared, shaking with the effort. "No!" I gasped, the word tearing from my throat. With a snarl of pure frustration, he released his power and threw me away from him. I crashed into a heavy wooden table, sending a pitcher of water smashing to the floor. I lay there, gasping, my entire body trembling with the after effects. Kalen was breathing heavily, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He looked at me, not with anger now, but with something that looked horrifyingly like fear. "Get out," he whispered. "What?" "Get out. Go back to the barracks, and do not," he pointed a shaking finger at me, "speak of this to anyone. If you do, I will cut out your tongue." I scrambled to my feet, my legs unsteady, and fled the room. I didn't stop running until I was back in the cold, damp barracks, burrowed under my thin straw mattress, shaking as if I had a fever. What had happened? That jolt! It was more than just a spark. It was like a dormant part of me had woken up for a second, recognized something in him, and then vanished. And his reaction? He was terrified. The Alpha everyone feared was afraid of me. The next few weeks fell into a brutal routine. I worked in the kitchens from before dawn until long after dusk. Greta rode me mercilessly, but the other Omegas, who had at first been suspicious, slowly started to talk to me. They saw I wasn't getting special treatment. In fact, I was getting the worst of it. They shared scraps of food with me, told me which guards to avoid, and where to find the warmest places to sleep. I learned more about Kalen. His father, the old Alpha, had been strong but fair. His mother, a woman named Lyra, had been beloved, but she died mysteriously when Kalen was a teenager. After her death, his father became hard. When he, too, died on a border patrol, Kalen took over. He was a different man from his father. He was ruthless, cold, and driven by a singular, dark purpose: to make his pack so strong that no one would ever dare threaten it again. The Shadow Ridge Pack, led by the cunning and vicious Alpha Xander, was his greatest threat. They were constantly testing the borders, ambushing patrols, and trying to steal territory. Kalen's brutality was a direct response to Xander's aggression. Kalen himself, I avoided him, and he seemed to be avoiding me. I caught glimpses of him in the courtyard, training his warriors, his voice a sharp bark of commands. Sometimes I would look up and find him watching me from a high window. His expression was always the same: dark, brooding, and utterly unreadable. He never summoned me again. The spark we'd felt, it was a secret that lay between us, unspoken and volatile. One evening, I was tasked with taking a food tray to the old Alpha's wing. No one ever went there. It was kept locked. But Greta, in a fit of pique, had decided I was the one to deliver a respect meal to the late Alpha's memory. It was a stupid, superstitious ritual, and I knew it was just another punishment. The guard at the door to the wing unlocked it for me, his face pale. "Don't touch anything," he warned. "The Alpha, he doesn't like people in here." I entered the wing. It was cold and covered in dust, the furniture draped in white sheets like silent ghosts. It was clear no one had lived here in years. I walked down the hall to what must have been the old Alpha study, placed the tray on a table just inside the door, and turned to leave. But something caught my eye. A book left open on a desk, as if its reader had just stepped away. It was a leather-bound journal. Unlike everything else, it was dust-free. Curiosity, a dangerous, stupid impulse, made me walk over to it. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was a terrible idea. But I couldn't help myself. I looked at the looping, feminine script. Kalen worries me. The power in him is so strong, but the shadow his father casts is so long. He feels he must be steel, but steel can shatter. He needs a balance. He needs the one I saw in the flames. I flipped back a few pages. The prophecy is clear. The seers of the Shadow Ridge Pack believe it's a weapon, a being to be captured and used. But they are wrong. It is not a weapon. It is a heart. A shadow wolf, they call it. Not wolfless, but other. A shifter with no scent, whose power is not of the claw, but of the soul. This wolf will be the Alpha's salvation, or his ruin, and their bond will be forged in defiance. My blood turned to ice. A shifter with no scent, forged in defiance. What are you doing? The voice was ice. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Kalen stood in the doorway, his face a mask of utter, uncontrolled fury. His eyes weren't on me. They were on the journal in my hands. You left the door open," I stammered, dropping the book as if it were on fire. "I mean, the guard, Greta sent me." "You," he whispered, advancing on me, "are a spy." "No, Kalen, I swear, I saw it, "You are a Shadow Ridge spy," he roared. He grabbed my arm, his fingers biting into my flesh, and dragged me from the room. "No, I'm not. I don't know anything," I screamed, panicked, trying to dig my heels in. He didn't listen. He hauled me down the stairs, through the main hall, and out into the central courtyard. Warriors, Omegas, pack members, everyone stopped what they were doing and stared. "Jax! Riker!" Kalen bellowed. His enforcers appeared at his side instantly. "This," Kalen announced, his voice booming across the stone-paved square, "is a spy, sent by Xander. I found her in my mother's private rooms, reading her journals." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Murmurs turned to angry growls. "Traitor! Kill her! Shadow Ridge filth! She's been poisoning our food," someone yelled. "She's been signaling Xander's warriors." "No!" I cried, desperate, looking at the faces of the Omegas I'd worked with, who now looked at me with hatred. "I didn't! I swear!" "She has no scent," Kalen continued, his voice cold as the grave. "A perfect spy. She resisted my Alpha command. She has been biding her time, waiting to strike at the heart of this pack. He threw me to the ground in the center of the courtyard. The penalty for treason is death." Jax drew his long knife, his teeth bared in a cruel grin. "Kalen, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face as I crawled backward. I don't know Xander. I was just curious. Please, I have a brother, Finn, please." "A spy's pity," Kalen sneered. "She'll say anything to save her own skin." He looked at Jax. "End it." Jax advanced on me. I squeezed my eyes shut, a sob tearing from my chest. "Finn, I'm so sorry." "Well, well, well." A new voice echoed across the courtyard. A slow, mocking drawl that dripped with malice. I opened my eyes. Kalen and his warriors had spun around. On the pack house wall, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood a tall, slender man with hair the color of spilled ink. He was flanked by at least 20 warriors, their black armor a stark contrast to the Stonefang's brown and gray. "Alpha Xander," Kalen growled, his body shifting into a defensive crouch. "How did you get past my sentries?" "Your sentries," Xander said with a smirk, "are indisposed. You've become predictable, Kalen," he jested at me, "that you forgot about the enemy at your gates." Xander's eyes, a strange shade of violet, moved from Kalen and settled on me. A slow, deeply unsettling smile spread across his face. "So, there she is, the little shadow. I must thank you, Kalen. I've been looking for her for months. I knew she was in this valley, but your territory is so large. You finding her and bringing her here saved me a great deal of trouble." Kalen's face was white. You were looking for her?" "Of course I was," Xander laughed. "The Shadow Wolf, the scentless one, the key." Your mother's precious prophecy. Did you really think my seers didn't read the same flames? She's a weapon, Kalen, a prize, and you were about to break her. What a waste. The courtyard erupted. Kalen's warriors moved to form a defensive circle as Xander's men dropped from the walls, landing like cats. The battle began without another word. It was chaos. The clash of steel, the roar of shifting wolves, the screams of the injured. I scrambled backward, trying to get out of the way, pressing myself against the stone wall of the kitchen. Kalen and Xander met in the center of the yard. They weren't fighting with knives. They were fighting with pure alpha power. They were both shifting, their forms rippling, clothes tearing as claws and fur sprouted. Kalen was a massive gray wolf, Xander a sleek, terrifying black one. They clashed, a blur of fur and teeth. "Get the girl!" Xander roared, even as he fought. Two of his warriors broke from the fight and lunged for me. Before I could even scream, Jax and Riker intercepted them. Kalen's enforcers, for all their cruelty, were loyal to their alpha, and they fought like demons to protect his property. "Get her to the keep," Jax yelled at me, slitting the throat of a Shadow Ridge warrior. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran, dodging bodies and blades, heading for the main pack house. But as I reached the door, I saw a flash of movement from the gate. More Shadow Ridge warriors were pouring in, and they weren't just warriors. They were dragging pack members with them, Omegas, children, prisoners. And at the front, held by two massive brutes, was Finn. My world stopped. "Finn!" I shrieked. He saw me, his eyes wide with terror. "Elara, run, run!" Xander's voice, now a guttural growl from his wolf form, ripped through the chaos. He snapped at Kalen's throat, forcing him back, and his violet wolf eyes pinned me. A complication. Or an opportunity. He barked in order. His warriors dragged Finn into the center of the courtyard. The fighting slowed, both sides pulling back, forming two armed, snarling circles. In the middle were Kalen, Xander, me, and Finn. Xander, in his half-shifted form, smirked, his fangs dripping. "Well, Kalen, this simplifies things. A trade." Kalen, breathing heavily, his gray fur matted with blood, glared at him. "I don't make deals with you, Xander." "You will today." Xander gestured to Finn, and one of the warriors pressed a knife to my brother's throat. Finn whimpered. "Her," Xander said, pointing a clawed hand at me, "for the boy. A simple exchange. The weapon for the weakness." My heart shattered. I looked at Kalen. His face was unreadable, his ice-blue eyes impossible to decipher. He was trapped. Xander knew it. If he refused, Finn would die, and his pack would see him as a monster who sacrificed a child. If he agreed, he would be handing Xander the very weapon he'd been seeking, the one Kalen's own mother had prophesied about. I saw the calculation in his eyes. I saw the second he made his choice. He looked at me, and his gaze was pure ice, the same ice I'd seen in the diner. "You are a curse, Ilara," he snarled, his voice low and full of venom. "You have been nothing but a curse since you walked into my life." He turned to Xander. "Take her. Give me the boy." My knees buckled. It was a physical blow. A curse. After everything, after the spark, he was still the monster everyone said he was. He was trading me. He was giving me to Xander to save face, to save a boy he didn't even know. "No," I whispered, but the sound was lost. "A pleasure doing business with you," Xander purred. He shoved Finn forward. "Bring me my prize." Two of Xander's warriors grabbed my arms, dragging me forward as Kalen's men pulled Finn to their side. I was numb. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel anything but the echoing cold of Kalen's words. A curse. We met in the middle. I was shoved roughly toward Xander. He grabbed my hair, pulling my head back, and inhaled deeply at my neck. Scentless, magnificent. He grinned at Kalen. "You have no idea what you've just given up." Kalen just stared at me, his face a mask of stone. "Kill the boy," Xander whispered to the warrior still standing near Finn. My head snapped up. "What? No, you promised." The warrior grinned and raised his knife. Finn screamed. "Kalen!" I shrieked. It was a trap. Xander was never going to let Finn live. But Kalen had known. The instant the warrior's knife moved, Kalen wasn't a stone-faced alpha. He was lightning. He moved faster than I'd ever seen a man move, his own knife appearing in his hand. He didn't go for Xander. He went for the warrior, tackling him, his blade burying itself in the Shadow Ridge shifter's chest. At the exact same moment, I felt it. It wasn't a thought. It was an explosion. The terror, the betrayal, the rage at Finn's impending death, it all coalesced inside me. It wasn't a spark this time. It was an inferno. A wave of pure, silent energy erupted from my body. It wasn't light. It was shadow. A visible, tangible wave of darkness that blasted outward. It slammed into everyone around me. Xander, his warriors, Kalen's warriors. They were all thrown back as if hit by a physical wall. The men holding me were flung away. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the courtyard lengthened, twisting and writhing, drawn to me. I stood in the center of a vortex of my own making, my hands clenched, my body trembling, not with fear, but with a terrifying ancient power. "The prophecy," Xander breathed, climbing to his feet, his eyes wide with awe and greed. "It's real." I looked at Finn, who was huddled on the ground. I ran to him, pulling him behind me. "Don't you touch him!" I screamed at Xander, and the shadows around me surged, forming whip-like tendrils. Xander laughed. "She can't control it! Kill them both! Take the boy's body and her power!" His warriors charged. "Stonefang, to me!" Kalen roared. He hadn't been planning to trade me. The look of ice, the cold words. It was a feint, a lie to make Xander believe he'd won. He'd been waiting for the treachery he knew was coming. He and his warriors met the charge. The battle was rejoined, but it was different now. Kalen wasn't fighting for his pack house. He was fighting his way to me. He carved a path through the Shadow Ridge warriors, a gray-furred demon of claws and fangs, his enforcers at his back. He reached my side, planting himself between me and the oncoming attackers. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but he stood like a mountain. "Elara," he grunted, his wolfish eyes locked on mine. "Can you do that again?" I don't know how," I cried. "Then just stay behind me." He met the next warrior, and the two alphas, Kalen and Xander, clashed again, right in front of me. It was a brutal, desperate fight. Xander was faster, but Kalen was stronger, fueled by a rage I now understood. It wasn't just about territory, it was about his. Xander raked his claws across Kalen's chest, throwing him to the ground. He loomed over him, his jaws snapping, going for the killing bite to the throat. "No!" I screamed. I threw my hands out. The shadows didn't just lash out. They flew from my palms, converging on Xander's back. They weren't solid, but they hit him. He roared in pain, not from a physical wound, but from a soul-deep cold. The energy sapped his strength, making him stumble. It was the opening Kalen needed. He surged up, not as a wolf, but in his man form, his knife in hand. He drove it up under Xander's ribs, deep. Xander roared, a sound of agony and disbelief. He staggered back, his form flickering, shrinking back to his human shape. He clutched his side, his violet eyes wide with shock. He looked at me, then at Kalen. "This isn't over," he choked. "It is for today," Kalen growled. Xander saw his warriors were being cut down. His gamble had failed. He barked a retreat. His remaining men grabbed him, dragging their wounded alpha back toward the wall, disappearing over it as quickly as they had come. The courtyard fell silent, broken only by the groans of the wounded. My power receded, the shadows shrinking back to their normal places. The strength that had filled me drained away, leaving me so weak I could barely stand. I looked at Kalen. He was standing over the body of a Shadow Ridge warrior, swaying on his feet. The gashes on his chest were deep, too deep. "Kalen?" I whispered. He looked at me. The ice was gone. His eyes were something else, confused, pained. He took a step toward me, then another. Then he collapsed, face first, onto the stone. "Kalen!" I ran to him, falling to my knees at his side. Jax and Riker were there a second later, turning him over. The front of his shirt was soaked in blood. He was bleeding out, fast. "Get the pack healer!" Jax roared at a nearby Omega. "He's too far," Riker said, his voice grim, pressing his hands to the wounds. He's not going to make it." "No," I said. It wasn't a plea, it was a command. I pushed Riker's hands away. "Girl, what are you doing?" Jax snarled. I think I can help." I looked at my hands. The shadows. They'd hurt Xander, but maybe. I placed my hands on Kalen's bleeding chest. I closed my eyes. I didn't think about anger or fear. I thought about Finn's laugh. I thought about the smell of coffee. I thought about the jolt of recognition I'd felt in his room. I pushed. The shadows came, but they weren't cold this time. They flowed from my palms, not black, but a deep, comforting indigo. They sank into his skin, into the wounds. I could feel his life force, a flickering, weak flame. My energy, my shadow, it wasn't draining him. It was feeding him, mending him. I felt the skin and muscle knitting together under my palms. I felt his breathing deepen, grow stronger. Kalen's eyes snapped open. He stared up at me, his blue eyes clear and sharp. He was no longer in pain. He was breathing easily. He looked down, saw my hands on his chest, and the strange, dark energy flowing into him. He didn't look afraid. He didn't look angry. He looked found. He raised a hand, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "Mate," he breathed. It wasn't a command, it wasn't a claim. It was a revelation, a question and an answer all in one. I just stared at him, tears streaming down my face, my entire world tilting on its axis. Then, as the pack gathered around us, their expressions of hatred replaced with awe, he lost consciousness, his head lolling to the side. But his hand was still on my cheek, and his breathing was deep and even. He was healed. I had healed him. They called me the Shadow Healer. In the day that followed, the story spread through the pack house like wildfire. The spy who was a curse, the battle, the awakening of a new power, the healing of the Alpha. I didn't leave Kalen's side. Finn was brought to the room, safe and sound, and he clung to me, his eyes wide as he looked at the sleeping Alpha. The pack healer, an old woman named Morag, came and examined Kalen. She looked at his chest, where only faint, silvery scars remained of the mortal wounds. She looked at me, her old eyes sharp. "What you did? That wasn't pack magic." "I don't know what it was," I whispered, exhausted. "It was life magic," she said, a strange reverence in her voice. "The prophecy, it called you a shadow wolf. But shadows aren't just about darkness. They are the balance to the light. Without them, the sun would scorch the earth." She nodded slowly. "The Alpha, he has been all sun, all fire and steel. He needed his shadow." Kalen woke that evening. The first thing he did was sit up and look for me. I was sitting in the chair by his bed, holding Finn's hand. "Finn," Kalen said, his voice rough. Finn flinched. "You're safe here," Kalen said, "both of you. I'm moving you from the barracks. You will have a room in this wing, near me." "Why?" I asked, my voice small. He swung his legs out of the bed, standing. He was strong, whole. He walked over to me, kneeling down so he was at my eye level. Jax and Riker, who had been guarding the door, watched with stunned silence. "Because," Kalen said, his voice soft, "you are not a curse. You are everything." He looked at Finn. "What I did to you in the diner, there is no excuse. I was a tyrant. I let the fear of Xander, the fear of my own past, turn me into a monster. I am sorry." Finn just stared, speechless. An Alpha, the Alpha, apologizing to him? Kalen turned back to me. "What I said, in the courtyard, a curse. It was a feint," I whispered, "to trick Xander." "It was," he confirmed. "I knew he wouldn't honor the trade. I had to get you and the boy close enough to act. But," he winced, the words came too easily, "because I was afraid. Afraid of what you made me feel. That jolt in my room. It wasn't just power. It was recognition. My soul recognized yours, and it terrified me." You called me mate," I said, my face heating. "I did." He took my hand. His was so large, warm and calloused. Mine was small, and I now realized, humming with a quiet, dark energy. The bond, it's not like the ones I've read about. It's not just a wolf bond. It's something more. The prophecy. My mother, she knew. She knew I would need you. "Xander is still out there," I said, my newfound strength returning. "He'll be back. He wants this power." "Let him come," Kalen said, his eyes hardening, but not with the coldness from before. This was a protective fire. He won't be facing the Stonefang Alpha. He'll be facing the Stonefang Alpha and his shadow. He stood, pulling me gently to my feet. He led me to the window, the same one he'd been staring out of that first night, The valley was peaceful below, bathed in the light of the setting sun. "You stood up to the Alpha everyone feared," he murmured, his arms circling my waist, pulling me against his side. It felt right, safe. But you were wrong. "Wrong about what?" I asked, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I wasn't the Alpha everyone should fear," he said, his lips brushing my hair. "Xander was. But now?" He turned me to face him, his hands cupping my face. "Now, they will learn to fear us, together." "What now, Kalen?" I asked, my heart, once shattered, now feeling impossibly, terrifyingly whole. Enemy or mate? He smiled, a true smile this time, one that lit his eyes and transformed his harsh face into something beautiful. "Is there a difference?" he whispered. "You are my greatest strength, Ilara, my fiercest ally, my shadow healer, my mate." He lowered his head and kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of possession or of dominance. It was a kiss of promises. A promise of battles to come, of a shared throne, of a life forged not in fear, but in a power neither of them had ever understood. Under the rising moon, the Alpha and his shadow finally stood as one.